Greetings and salutations, viewers. Welcome to Book Expo America 2017. We are back at Waldorf Publishing with another author of theirs. This time we are talking to Ken Yoffe. Thank you for taking a few moments of your time.
You're very welcome.
We are hoping to learn a bit about your book.
Okay, well, I probably should get a copy of it at some point and show it to you. My background is, thank you very much. My background is that I'm actually a pediatrician and novice geography fan. I'm not going to say expert, but trying to be. And my wife is a scientist, but she also does, as a hobby, weather reports. Oh. And so from doing weather reports, they do weather reports kind of all over the world. That's the company she worked for. And kind of a hobby. And she got very interested in geography because she'd be doing weather reports in places she had never heard of. So that was sort of the background. And she had already written some novels, a couple novels. One of them actually was published by Waldorf last year. And so we decided to go with the nonfiction route this time and do a series of children's books. The first one of which was called Friends and Mates in 50 States. And we were able to get it published by a small press in Minnesota called Galdi Press.
Nice.
And ex-school teacher, very nice lady. She's kind of in semi-retirement now. After we wrote Friends and Mates in 50 States and published that, we did a bunch of other books, 3 or 4 others on other countries and continents. We did Europe, China, Canada.
Cool.
And as we did those, we kind of got better at doing it. So then once we signed with Waldorf for the novel last year, we figured, and since Galdi wasn't going to be really continuing to publish books, we figured we would not only want to republished the book, but also we knew by then we had gotten better, and the last couple books were of higher quality in our opinion than the original Friends and Mates, so we kind of wanted to spruce that up again.
Nice.
So we kept the basic structure of the book the same, but we just kind of implemented some of the improved thoughts that we had on the newer books.
Okay.
And incorporated into them. So things like a table of contents, we didn't even have that in the original book. We improved some of the artwork a little bit, and we just improved some of the writing, we thought, a little bit as well. So the basic gist of the book is it's not on the curriculum, it's not an educational book per se. It's more of either a supplementary book for grade schools, probably targeting around 3rd grade, but sort of someone who wants to use it as a study guide who's a little bit older, maybe a reluctant reader who's a little bit older, as old as 5th or 6th grade, or for a younger child who, just in terms of it being an entertaining sort of storybook without needing to necessarily memorize or learn a lot about the United States.
Okay.
So basically we've tried to help kids learn about, and I'll show you what some of the pages look like, help kids learn about the United States in not any particular bias toward East Coast or larger states. Each state's got 2 pages. New York's got the same number of pages as Wyoming. In fact, Wyoming is the second. We started with the Western United States first, and Wyoming is actually the second book that's discussed, whereas the East Coast, for no particular reason, ended up being last. The idea was for the reader to take a tour through the states, and they started off in the West, somewhat randomly, I guess, and ended up in Washington, D.C. We wanted to end up in Washington, D.C. at the end of the tour, and since that's we consider to be a northeastern city, by the way, we arbitrarily broke the geography down. It made sense to end with the Northeast. So the basic idea of the book is we first try to give the reader an idea, which region of the country a particular state is. It helps you kind of remember all the states and where they are and the products they have, the kinds of culture they have there. If you can sort of first think of as, Montana is in the north, it's kind of on the western side, not the west coast, but the western side of the country, it's in the north.
Somewhere off that-a-ways, I think.
Somewhere off that-a-ways, and it's really big. So so Montana happens to be the first state, so we kind of start the tour off by giving an introduction of all the United States, introducing the so-called tour guides. For example, Willie is one tour guide, and his name is Willie because he's going to be touring the West. So a little mnemonic device. Not particularly too clever. We wanted to branch every 2 pages so they would match up together. So for example, on the opening page for the Western United States, we have a poem basically discussing a story basically about Willie and what he's going to sort of, where he's going to bring you. A relatively brief poem, but the idea that being that since it's in a poem form, it would help you maybe remember a few things of which states happen to be in the West. The poem is on one side. The other side has got just a brief text, non-poem, some information. to kind of supplement the poem itself. And we kind of highlight the western states. The United States can be seen, and the western states are highlighted. I'm just going to give you the example of Montana, divided into the Rockies, the Northwest, and the Pacific Coast. Many geographers would divide the United States in many different ways. This is just one way of dividing.
Everyone has their own opinions.
We've used the Rockies, the Pacific Coast, and the Pacific Northwest as our arbitrary Western United States.
Okay.
The way we've done it, it ends up breaking the regions down into about 12 or 13 states each. And that gives you 50.
Okay.
So there's 13 states that make up the Rockies and the West Coast. I think it's like 6 or 7 in the Rockies and 6 on the West Coast. So for Montana, for example, then you can see that we have the United States map again, but just Montana highlighted on the top there. Every page has got some artwork based on some of the products, animals, crops, cultural things in some cases from each state. Some of them are on the side that's got the map on it. We also introduced the state bird, the state tree, and the state flower, and then write a little bit about some of what we think that most kids and adults would find interesting about Montana.
Okay.
It's certainly not meant to teach you everything there is to know about the state of Montana, but to give you some things that might make you say, oh, Montana, it's an interesting state. I never knew much about Montana. I knew it was a huge state, and I know that there's a lot of cool-looking rivers, and you go bass fishing because there's a movie about it. But other than that, it's a beautiful scenery, but I don't know much else about it. Some people maybe didn't even know that much about it. And then the second page, and this is the same layout for every state. The second page has got a closer up view of the state, some of the important towns, maybe the capital certainly, even if the capital's not a particularly large town. And a lot of capitals, it turns out, are actually relatively small towns. Not all of them are like Boston in Massachusetts or Atlanta in Georgia. Some of them are, Albany's a reasonably large-sized town in the state of New York. And Richmond's, pretty large in Virginia, but I know that, for example, Carson City is pretty tiny, as is Montpelier in Nevada, and Montpelier is pretty small in Vermont. All the towns are actually pretty small in Vermont. So not all the states did that. A lot of the states, I think, it turns out, made the capital sort of in the middle. Back in the days when I guess you had to take a horse and buggy to get to the capital city and talk to whoever official you had to talk to. So biggest 2 or 3 towns plus the capital. We like to show some mountain ranges. It's not meant to be geographically perfect, but it just gives you an idea that, for example, in Montana, the western part of the state's where the mountains are. The eastern part of the state's actually, a lot of people, I didn't know this, is actually really the northern plains. I always thought of Montana as being mountains.
I didn't know it started there.
A good chunk of maybe a third, or I don't know, a good chunk of the state, maybe a third of the state's actually in the northern plains. We think of the Dakotas, and these are right next to the Dakotas, so it's flatland. We always want to list that underneath the state motto, which is in the case of Montana is the treasure state. Some states have more than one motto. We didn't always try to list every single motto, but some of them we list 2 or 3. I forgot to say some other important geographical boundaries. Like if a river happens to make up one boundary of the state, we mention that. If the continent of Canada happens to be to the north of that, or Mexico to the south, we mention that. We don't mention the other states. For that, you can sort of look at the go back and try to look at some of the neighboring pages for that. And that was just to keep the book from getting too crowded, basically.
Fair enough.
We also like to point out the largest mountain, if there is a largest mountain, in each state. Some of them, the largest, highest elevated area in each state's actually a hill. In Florida, I think the highest elevation is probably below sea level on them.
Wouldn't surprise me.
I might be exaggerating that, actually. So then we introduce the child who's sort of giving you the tour of that state. In the case of Montana, the child's name is Helena, or Helen for short, and the astute observer will notice that the capital of each, the character who's the capital, who's introducing each state is named after the capital of each state. That's just a way of a mnemonic device to help remember that the capital is Helena. If you kind of picture the book, picture the kid. And then in order to help remember some other important or interesting facts about the state, we have a poem based on Helena and what she's telling you about the state. So there's a poem about Montana. It's very short. It's not meant to point out all the things that we mentioned in the paragraph on the preceding page, but some of them, in order to make them rhyme and just make them interesting. And we have some more artwork. This artwork is more geared toward what was actually in the poem. So if we mention lumber in the poem, we might have some lumber pictures of lumber on
So you
that
can
side.
help link everything together in your head.
Right. Otherwise, like the cattle and the other important stuff that is important but didn't get mentioned in the poem kind of got placed on the other side.
Okay.
And then the guy who did the artwork, who actually lives in Paris, and his name is Barris, which I always find amusing for some reason. He's not from Paris, but his name is Barris. He actually provided some of the other artwork just to make it more wieldy for kids and stuff, and I thought he did a really good job on that. I thought he did a really good job with the fonts as well. This was much improved from our other book, where all the fonts were kind of the same. It's also, I think, spaced a little bit better. It's a little bit larger of a book. And so that's it. So you have the major introduction at the beginning with the table of contents. You have each individual region, west, north, Midwest, Northeast, and South. And then for each region, you have each state, some facts about the state, some artwork, where the state actually is, and then a poem with a character who kind of reads the poem to you and gives you a tour as she's giving the regional tour guide, in this case Willie from the West, his tour. Then
Very
you move
cool.
on. You move on to another character after that, another region after that, Hawaii. It's got Little Honolulu, and Minnesota has the twins of St. Paul and Minnie, short for Minneapolis. But I think you
Very
get the
cool.
idea. So that's it. And we end with Washington, D.C. And like I said, the thing I like about it, I think for myself at least, I think adults, even though it's a children's book, I think adults secretly can flip through it and say, oh, I never knew that. And oh, so that's where...
How many of us are actually good with geography?
Well, I loved it when I was little, and that was part of, I was actually one of the things I was good at that I didn't really necessarily try to be good at. And Ellen, for her, my wife who co-wrote the book, it was more of a learning process for her. But there are a lot of things, I never knew that Georgia actually touched North Carolina. I thought it kind of touched South Carolina, and South Carolina kind of touched North Carolina. So you didn't, there's a lot of things about states that you didn't necessarily ever go to or never heard of, or never knew much about that you can learn about. Very
cool. Where can our viewers check out this book?
Okay, well, obviously the Waldorf site. Since I'm interviewing for Waldorf, this is being released in Waldorf officially, I believe, in October or August of 2017. You can also get the book over Amazon. The best thing to do to probably find the book is to go to our webpage. Our webpage has a lot of materials that go with the book. It's also got a lot of materials for the other books in the series. Like I said, there was one on Europe, one on China, and one on Canada so far, plus some other children's books we've done and some novels we've done. Every one of those has materials that you can download. In some cases, in the case of some of the other books, you can actually, at this time, you can actually download the ebook itself. Not in print, not in this case, but you can download the ebook itself. But there's teaching materials. For example, there are plane maps. Where you can try to label, and where's the state of Ohio? What's the capital of Ohio? Which region? They'll show the Midwest. Which state is this? They'll have labeled Kentucky, Ohio, Illinois, and you can kind of name them that way. So the website is www.weisberg-yoffe.org, and that's my wife's last name and my last name. It's weisberg-yoffe.org.
Very cool. I encourage all our viewers and listeners out there to go to the website, go check out the books, place some orders, and after having read them or reviewed them or had fun with them, post in the comments below what you thought of them so we can continue the conversation.
Please, lots of comments.
And we will see you all next time.